There's a very interesting hadith in which the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that the day of judgment will not come until you Muslims fight people whose appearance will be very red, their noses will be completely flat, they will have small eyes and faces as flat as shields, and whose shoes will be made of hair. Now after this hadith, the Prophet, peace be upon him, had conquered the entire Arabia by the time of his death, and the Muslim empire had spread throughout Arabia, after which, during the Caliphate Rashida's 30 years under Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, Muslims, for the first time leaving Arabia, created the largest empire in human history, and for the first time, Muslims became the world's superpower. But after just 30 years of rule, the Caliphate Rashida was ended and the Caliphate came under the control of a family, Banu Umayyad, who then ruled this Muslim empire for 90 years, and expanded it from the size of the Rashidun Caliphate to such a large territory. The Umayyad Caliphate had conquered such a large territory. But there was a big problem with the Umayyad Caliphate, that this caliphate was only and only for Arabs, in which non-Arab people had no status. To this extent, despite having such a large empire, Arabs always met very little with the rest of the population in this entire empire, and it was impossible for any non-Arab to marry an Arab. And in the Umayyad government, all posts were only for Arabs. This was just like how non-Arabs are treated in UAE and Saudi Arabia today. Fed up with all this, there was a rebellion against the Umayyads from within their country, and another family, the Abbasids, took over the caliphate, who were descendants of the Prophet's uncle, Hazrat Abbas. May Allah be pleased with him. Now, it was during the Abbasid time that Muslim power reached its peak, which is known in the West as the Islamic Golden Age, when Baghdad, the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, was the world's most powerful city. Thing that they built the world's largest library inside their capital Baghdad, which was called the House of Wisdom. And this library was filled with the world's best books, stories, and poetry, because of which all the intellectual people, scientists, poets, and artists from around the world started gathering in this city, leaving their own areas for translation so that people could sit here and translate the writings of the world's ancient great people into the Arabic language. And when this translation started, gradually the Arabic language began to become the world's most powerful language, the way English is today. For the first time in the world, they started funding scientists to do their research, because of which big Muslim scientists emerged in the world. A man named Khwarezm. He first introduced algebra in the world. One of the greatest mathematicians of all time, Muslim in the golden age of Islam, who still holds great importance in world science today. In the Abbasid Caliphate, along with science, arts also progressed a lot. And during this period, books like 1001 Nights were written, in which stories were written on which movies are still made in Hollywood today. For example, Aladdin, Alibaba, they know about Alibaba and Sinbad, etc. In short, Muslims were the world's superpower, and there was no one in the world to challenge them. But whenever in history any empire reaches this level, then there is only one way forward from there: decline. It happened to the Abbasids, as before them the Umayyad Caliphate, as we know, was only for Arabs. But the Abbasid Caliphate was completely opposite to them. Meaning during this caliphate, people from every corner of the empire were involved in the government: Persian, Turk, Greek, all. And an Abbasid caliph even made a very powerful army of Turks, the Seljuk army. And this army, with the passage of time, became so strong that instead of strengthening the Abbasid Caliphate, it took all control of the caliphate in its own hands. After which the caliph was caliph only in name, and all the power of the country was with the Seljuk army. This is like today if in some country the prime minister is prime minister only in name, and all the power of the country is with someone else. Sorry, after the Seljuk army's control, because of this army, slowly, the Abbasid Caliphate weakened and rebellions started everywhere in their such large empire, which finally divided this huge empire into small pieces, because of which Palestine was snatched from Muslims' hands for the first time. Many years before all this, during the first caliphate, when Hazrat Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, was conquering all these areas, he had also conquered Jerusalem, the holiest city of Christians. After that, for the next 450 years, no one had the courage to take Palestine from Muslims. But when the Abbasid Caliphate weakened and Muslims got divided into very small parts, then The Christians of Europe of this time took full advantage, and to snatch Jerusalem and Palestine from Muslims' hands started a very big war, the Crusades, the mighty battle between Christianity and Islam. And finally, in 1099, after conquering Palestine and Jerusalem, they martyred thousands of Muslims, children, women, old people, and set fire to their homes. It's even written in a book that the Crusaders snatched babies from Muslim mothers and threw them down from tall buildings. Muslims tried to escape from these Crusaders by hiding in houses and mosques, but instead of getting them out, the Crusaders set fire to those houses from outside, which burned thousands of Muslims to ashes. If you think, how can someone be so cruel? Then even today, exactly the same things are happening in Palestine. Only a few Muslims escaped from the Christians' oppression. And these Muslims took with them from Masjid al-Aqsa, that old holy Quran which was written during the time of Hazrat Uthman. Despite all this oppression, there was no such leader of Muslims in the world who could conquer Palestine again. But just 40 years after losing Palestine, in Iraq, in the house of an ordinary soldier, Najmuddin Ayyub, a child was born who is remembered by the name of Yusuf Salahuddin Ayyubi. At the age of 25, Salahuddin Ayyubi left Iraq with his uncle and went towards Egypt. And there slowly, after a very long struggle, he became the Sultan, the King of Egypt. This is a very long story, and we'll do it again. Now, when here in Egypt, Salahuddin Ayyubi was going towards becoming the King of Egypt, during this time here, very far in Mongolia, in a small village in the house of the chief of a small tribe, a child was also born whose name was Temujin, later known as Genghis Khan. Yes, Salahuddin and Genghis Khan were alive in the same era. One had to take Muslims back towards glory, and the other had to destroy Muslims in such a way that no one had done before. After losing Palestine, and especially Jerusalem, Muslims did not have any strong leader. But during this period, the most tremendous role was played by Muslim scholars, the ulema. Before this, Muslims used to fight among themselves all the time and were divided into many sects. Some very great scholars started uniting them on one goal, that Palestine has to be conquered again at any cost. Due to this, in the next many years, the young population of Muslim kingdoms had this thing very well established in their minds. But still, Muslims did not have such a single leader who could unite them and attack Christians. Finally, Salahuddin Ayyubi, after becoming the Sultan of Egypt, first made a deal with a group of Christians that for the next 10 years, there would be complete peace, and they would not attack each other. Salahuddin Ayyubi first started uniting Muslims, and then, after conquering this entire area, he had become the most powerful Muslim king in the world. All the Muslims of the world started looking towards Salahuddin Ayyubi to conquer Palestine. The great scholars of that time also supported Salahuddin Ayyubi, among whom the biggest scholar's name was Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani. Abdul Qadir Jilani at that time was the world's most influential scholar, whom Salahuddin Ayyubi also greatly respected. Finally, Salahuddin Ayyubi attacked the Crusaders with his army and in the year 1192 completely conquered and secured Jerusalem. 1192 was a very important year in Muslim history because this year, on one hand, Salahuddin Ayyubi achieved such a big conquest, and on the other hand, Shahabuddin Ghori attacked India, conquered it, and also laid the foundation of the Delhi Sultanate. Now, almost 100 years later, Muslims finally started becoming a little stable again, and their lost honor also started returning to them. But now, when Muslims had achieved some success, it was time for the hadith spoken 600 years ago by the Prophet, peace be upon him, to be fulfilled. So far from all this, Genghis Khan had united Mongolia and was rapidly increasing his power everywhere. Genghis Khan's real name was Temujin, and his father was the chief of a small tribe in Mongolia. But Temujin's uncle had secretly poisoned his father, after which Temujin and his entire family continued to live a very hard life. And it is said that at one time, Temujin also lived as someone else's slave in China. But then, Temujin finally returned to Mongolia, united his tribe, and slowly, this Mongol empire started growing. It became so big that the Mongols gave Temujin a very big title, Genghis Khan, which means the greatest king. Khan, this name was used in the Turkish language even before this, but because of Genghis Khan, this name became famous forever in the whole world. Meaning, according to some surveys today, there are 250 million people in the world whose names include Khan, such as Shah Rukh Khan, Amir Khan, and of course Imran Khan. Mongolia, even if seen today, is a very poor and ordinary country, and in those times it was even much weaker. That's why, even after the formation of this empire of Genghis Khan, China, Mongolia's neighbor, did not take it seriously. Because in the coming few years, Genghis Khan conquered China's capital Beijing, and for the first time people saw how cruel Genghis Khan could be. We have all heard stories of his cruelty, that he used to make pyramids by cutting off people's heads. But this cruelty of Genghis Khan was not his hobby. He got a very big advantage from this cruelty. He divided his entire army into groups of 10 men, and then from 10 to 100, and then 100 to 1,000, and 1,000 to groups of 10,000. Now, Genghis Khan made a rule for his army that in every group of 10 people, if even one person runs away leaving the battle, then the heads of the remaining 9 people of his group will be cut off. Due to this, soldiers of Genghis Khan's army did not let each other run away from the battle, and whoever tried to run away was killed by his own army. Apart from this, Genghis Khan made such a system of justice that if anyone in this empire steals someone else's horse and gets caught, he will have to return 10 horses in place of that one horse. And if he cannot return, then not only him, but his entire family, children, wife, parents, everyone will be killed. At first, Genghis Khan had no intention to fight with Muslims. That's why he sent a delegation with a message of friendship towards the king of Khwarezm. But the king of Khwarezm arrested all those people, because of which, to get them released, Genghis Khan sent his ambassador towards the king. But the king cut off that ambassador's head. Now this was a very big deal. Killing an ambassador or messenger is a very big crime in Islam and in every law of the world. When Genghis Khan came to know about this in Mongolia, he got very angry, and now it was a question of his honor. So he set out towards Khwarezm with his biggest army of 100,000. And here between Muslims and Mongols, the next 100 years of war began. Genghis Khan very quickly destroyed this entire empire of Khwarezm, and after conquering every city, he cut off the heads of its entire population. Then, he made pyramids of them, so that the whole world would know that messing with Genghis Khan is not an easy task. Before Genghis Khan's attack, the Khwarezm Empire, which includes today's Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan, had a population of about 2 million, and after Genghis Khan's attack, now the population here was only 200,000, meaning Genghis Khan had martyred 1.8 million Muslims after conquering these areas. One day Genghis Khan gathered all the Muslims in a mosque, and then he himself climbed the pulpit. He said to all the Muslims, "I have been sent as a punishment upon you from your Lord." After this, the Mongolian Empire grew even more and conquered Upper Russia as well. But during that time in Mongolia, Genghis Khan died and made his son Ogedei the king of all, and divided his entire empire among his sons. But even after Genghis Khan's departure, the Mongol Empire kept spreading everywhere, and finally, many years later, Genghis Khan's grandson Hulagu Khan prepared another very large army and started moving towards Baghdad, the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, which at that time was the world's largest and most powerful city. Now, it should have been that the Muslims of that time would unite and fight with the Mongols, but the Muslims of that time had become so divided into sects that, more than fighting with the Mongol Empire, they were more interested in debates and discussions with each other. Hulagu Khan surrounded Baghdad from all sides, and then finally, in 1258, snatched Baghdad from the Muslims and killed the Caliph of the Muslims. After which the Abbasid Caliphate ended forever after ruling for 500 years. After conquering Baghdad, Hulagu Khan's army shed so much blood that it is said that in Baghdad, the color of the Euphrates River, because of Muslims' blood, remained completely red for many days. And after the red color, it became black because Hulagu Khan burned all the books of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, which was the world's largest library, to ashes and threw them in the river, because of which the color of the Euphrates River remained completely black for many months. In history, such a hard time never came on Muslims that not only Muslims but even Islam's most holy sites were in danger, because after destroying the Abbasid Caliphate, now there was only one more sultanate before the Mongols, the Mamluk Sultanate, and if they defeated this too, then the control of Mecca and Medina would also go to the Mongols. So they would 100% have demolished the Kaaba in Mecca. When the Mongols conquered Baghdad and moved forward seeing this, the Mamluk Sultan of Egypt decided to fight the Mongols with his general Baybars. Everyone tried to explain to the Sultan that fighting with the Mongols is an impossible task because the people of that time and some great scholars had also said that these Mongols are actually Gog and Magog, and just after a short while the day of judgment is about to come, so defeating them is impossible. But still, the Sultan and his general Baybar started gathering an army against the Mongols. Now, during this time in Mongolia, Hulagu Khan's brother, who was the king of the entire Mongol Empire at that time, was killed. So Hulagu Khan was forced to go back with his large army from there and left a small army here. And finally, in Palestine at the place of Ain Jalut, the Mongol and Muslim armies faced each other. This Ain Jalut area is in Palestine, and it is called Ain Jalut because, according to the Jews, this is the exact place where thousands of years ago, David, peace be upon him, had defeated a very big warrior Goliath. And again now, thousands of years later, exactly the same happened here, that the weak Muslims for the first time defeated the great Mongol Empire very badly, and stopped the expansion of the Mongol Empire forever. Meaning, after losing this battle, the Mongol Empire never advanced beyond this. This was the war between Mongols and Muslims which the Prophet, peace be upon him, had already told about many years ago, which finally ended with the Battle of Ain Jalut. But still, a very large part of the Muslim world was under Mongol control, and no one in the world could challenge them. But then, slowly, these same Mongols started studying the religion of Islam here. And finally, they were so impressed that the entire Mongol family that was settled in these areas became Muslim, and all these areas came under Islamic control again. If you see all the names of Genghis Khan's descendants, first all their names were completely Mongol names like Jochi Chagatai Ogadei, but slowly, their names changed from Mongol to Muslim names, such as Muhammad Timur Yunus and Babur, because the Mughal Empire that ruled India for many years was from the same lineage of Genghis Khan. Hazrat Umar and Genghis Khan have one thing in common. They created the biggest and most powerful empires of their time. But there is a very big difference in these two empires. Today, Genghis Khan is remembered only as a cruel person, but Hazrat Umar is considered a great leader by the whole world.